So here we are. We're all together now as a worshiping community. It's good to see you all this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to First Universalist Church. It is good to be with you all today. This morning, our music director is actually taking a Sunday off, a well-deserved Sunday off. At the end of Brock Chesvold's semester, he's a student at the Eastman School of Music, and this time is wild. So we all just are so glad that Brock is taking a morning off, and we're also delighted that our music this morning comes from one of our fabulous members, Anne Rohde. And so this morning, our prelude is an aria from Anna Magdalena, and just take a deep breath, sit back, relax, and enjoy our prelude from Anne Rohde this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and to serve the community. Whoever you are welcome here. Wherever you come from, you are welcome here. And whomever you love, you are welcome here. Whatever practices sustain your heart and your spirit in this moment of your life, you are welcome here. All of you is welcome here. It is good, it is good, it is good to be together this morning. We acknowledge with respect this morning, as we do every Sunday morning, the Seneca Nation, keepers of the Western Door and part of the Haudenosaunee people, on whose ancestral lands First Universalist now stands. If you are visiting us for the first time, if you are new here, even for the first or the second or the third time, we welcome you. We welcome you here this morning into this space. There is a visitors forum that our fabulous usher, John Pelosi, has put a link to in the chat. Please click on it and fill out that visitors form at your convenience. We would love to welcome you beyond just the welcome that we can extend to you here in this sacred space. So please fill that out. And as folks are already doing, please pop into the chat and offer a greeting, especially if you're new here. Let us know that you're here for the first time. Folks would love an opportunity to get to greet you. And just please pop in, say anything. I'm here, hello, good morning. I've got my cup of coffee. I'm here from wherever. It's just great to get to hear who is here with us this morning and to acknowledge you and to welcome you. Welcome to worship at First Universalist Church. Our opening hymn this morning is a hymn that acknowledges that we are in all sorts of places in our lives. This is hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Let us join hearts and voices in singing together this morning, recognizing that even as we're singing muted in our own homes, we are creating a collective song across our city of Rochester, our country, and also the world. So let us sing hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Is
morning, everybody. I'm Kitty Forbush, and I am your worship associate this morning. What is it that feeds your soul? What takes you to the place where your heart is wide open, where your eyes are clear, where you can hear all you need to hear, where you can taste the nectar and smell the flowers? Is it the wind rustling lightly through the leaves of the trees on your walk through the springtime woods? Is it the sunlight on the water of a pond, a river, a lake, or the ocean, like flashing diamonds? Is it the smell of fresh coffee or an apple pie fresh from the oven? Is it the sound of our voices lifted in beautiful music, music that lifts us, soothes us, comforts us? What is it that brings you joy? What fills you up so full that sometimes your eyes fill up with tears of wonder and happiness? We come together here to our church to nurture our spirits, for in community, we find the joy that opens our hearts and feeds our souls. So come, let us worship together. As we light our chalice at First Universalist and in your own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by our doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. Today's offering will go to support the nonprofit organization Teen Empowerment, which empowers youth to catalyze positive change in themselves, their peers, and their communities. To do so, Teen Empowerment inspires youth to think deeply about the most difficult issues in their communities, like violence, educational inequities, and racism. Youth tap into their own strengths and talents, and Teen Empowerment provides them with the tools that help them work together for change. What a wonderful opportunity to use your treasure to support an organization that can nurture our spirits and serve our community. And just for an aside, Tom Williams and I sat last Saturday at our church with the door open so that the bathrooms could be used by the folks from Teen Empowerment who had a rally in Martin Luther King Park. So we're already supporting them. Please click on the link in the chat for online giving, or you may send a check to the church. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Good morning, friends. Today's story is Sakaskene Miyawatan Nete Ochi, or My Heart Fills with Happiness, written in both Plains Cree and in English by Monique Gray Smith and illustrated by Julie Flatt. Now, in this story, Monique Gray uses the word from Plains Cree Miyawatomen for happiness. But in doing a little research, I found out they have at least 4 words for happiness, or different variations, and at least 4 words for joy. Today's story uses a word that is defined as amusement, delight, and elation. My heart fills with happiness when I see the face of someone I love. When I smell bannock baking in the oven. Yum. When I sing. My heart fills with happiness when I feel the sun dancing on my cheeks. When I walk barefoot on the grass. When I dance. My heart fills with happiness when I hold the hand of someone I love. When I listen to stories. When I drum. What fills your heart with happiness? However you define joy or happiness, I hope that you find many spiritual practices that bring much of each into your life. Thank you.
Dear ones, this morning we are here to celebrate with each other the joys and to bear witness to one another's sorrows. It is a common ritual for us and a very important one for us to engage in this ritual of sharing joys and sorrows with one another. So I have a bowl of stones here, and I have a bowl of water here. And as I place these stones into the bowl, I will read some of the joys and the sorrows aloud that are shared here in the chat. Certainly all joys and sorrows are welcome, remembering that this service is a public service and certainly will be on YouTube after this date. So please, I invite you, if you would like, to place a hand over your heart to be able to listen from a heart-centered, heart-grounded place, and to get to just listen to the joys and the sorrows of our gathered community. This morning, I share a joy from Karen Labraco that last weekend, my spouse and I were able to celebrate our son's birthday and Mother's Day in Nashville, followed by several days with our daughter and granddaughter near Atlanta. Fabulous, fabulous. So glad you're getting to do that, Karen and Bertie. A joy from Donna Anderson, who also got to have a birthday bash in Vermont, celebrating Janie, Evie, Tom, and TJ's birthday. Tom and I are so happy to be with the Whipple family and our friend Karen. It is amazing what can be made possible. We share this morning a joy from Brock Chesvold, our music director, who won a music competition last night and will be playing a concert as a result. Certainly details will appear during announcements at the end of the service, but just sending deep congratulations to Brock Chesvold and all the hard work he put into that competition. This morning we share a sorrow as well from Connie Volk, whose sister-in-law, Apollonia Zonevelt, died this past week. Our hearts are with Connie and with her Dutch family. We have an update from Norma Sitnick, whose husband Jim has been in the hospital. Jim Sitnick is recovering from his surgery and staying in the hospital until Monday, when he hopes to get to rehab. I just wanted to share gratitude from Norma for all of the cards she has been receiving from our congregation. Thank you so much for your support. We share, of course, a sorrow this morning for the continuing and escalating conflict in Israel-Palestine, for the deaths, for the continued wounds, for all whose hearts are in one of those places and in both of those places. This morning we share two joys, or a joy from MJ Curry that this year of online teaching is over and we'll be back in the classroom in person next fall at the UURoc, sharing in that joy for all of our folks who have been affected by online education, and also all of our folks who will get to return. Oh, from Paula Marchese, a sorrow for all of the suffering in India and in the Middle East. Thank you, Paula, for lifting up especially India and all that is happening there. We are a community in the world, right? Two joys from Petty Goodwin. We saw our grandchildren, and my great niece Tara is 3 months pregnant with a baby boy. Fabulous. A boy as we know for now, right? Who's to say? A great joy from Kitty Forbush that my sister is coming to see me for my retirement party. Oh, retirement party. Wow, also a joy. Get your life, Kitty. From Steve Farrington, excited to move into a larger place with my husband Antonio in Brighton, with easy access to the canal path and the JCC, which we've joined. Awesome. Oh, we're so glad to hear that news. From Tess McFarland Porter, I got to hug my sister. Major joy. Love that. From Lyle Jenks, a sorrow of the sudden death of lifelong Bristol friend and neighbor Betty. Holding Betty and all who knew and loved them in our hearts, Lyle. Joy from our office administrator, Emma Berry, to have gone to the Rock Cycling Alliance's Light Up the Night bike ride on Friday night. It was so much fun to decorate our bikes and enjoy some socially distant socializing. Look forward to more bike rides this spring and summer. Hey. A sorrow from Johanna. 2 years ago, my husband Mike was dying in the hospital with 3 days to live. Holding you, Johanna, in your grief and all of your family as the anniversary date approaches of Michael's death. A joy, for the Unitarian Universalist Association, which turned 60 years old yesterday. Thanks, Jacob, for putting that in there. Yes, in 1961, we merged Unitarian and Universalism. I'm not going to go into a history lesson right now, but thank you so much, Jacob, for putting that piece in there. A joy from Tess McCrum, a joy for the city's newly proposed budget that funds the Police Accountability Board. Major news, major celebration in our community right now. Great joy from Gail Mosher and Hal Bauer over the healthy birth of our first grandchild, Leo. Fabulous. Mom and dad and baby are thriving. Our hearts are dancing and the baby pictures are gorgeous. So congratulations, you too, and also to mom and dad and baby Leo. What a joy. Oh my goodness. What a roller coaster we are on of life and death. Such a cycle. So let us just take a moment to take a deep breath as we drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all of the joys and sorrows that remain in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love this morning. Dear ones, we also always light a white candle, or we are at least through this pandemic, to recognize that we are a community that is in the midst of a pandemic. We light this candle to hold all of the hope of the family reunions, the joy of getting to see one another, the joys of getting to, return back to some semblance of life as it was before. And also, we light this candle to hold that our COVID rates are not getting better in Monroe County, that folks are still being affected by illness and sickness, that this pandemic is still in many ways alive. And we just light this candle to hold all of it as both a beacon of hope and a reminder that none of us, not one of us, is going through this pandemic alone. I want to invite you into a time of meditation with me, and it's meditation on gratitude. So if you'll just take a deep breath, settle in wherever you are. If you want to sit back further into your chair or just into the couch or wherever you're joining us from, just allow your body to relax and allow your weight to be held by the earth and what is supporting you on behalf of the earth underneath your body. For all that is our life, let us be profoundly grateful. For moments of magic and synchronicity, for times of joy and pain, for the moments when we can name and embrace what we are feeling, for the days that just flow one into another. Let us pause for a moment to just hold space in our hearts for what we are grateful for. What from our lives are we grateful for? Hold this gratitude in your mind and in your heart and in your spirit, and let it just sit with you. And if you feel so moved, please share some of your gratitude with us this morning by typing into the chat some of the things that you are grateful for. What comes to your mind and heart? Recognizing that I know for me, my gratitude grows when I'm able to share it with others, or when I hear from others what they are grateful for. So what are you grateful for this morning? This morning we are grateful for a wonderful spouse and family, for the rebirth of life in spring, grateful for the return of wildlife in and around our backyard, for my partner, my family, my dog, my friends, my students, and my church family. Grateful for grandchildren's vaccinations. Grateful for connecting with an old friend and my best man this last Friday. Wow. Grateful for the health of me and my partner as we work public-facing jobs. Thankful for this church. Even if it's been at a distance, the church has been such a comfort for me the past few months. I share that gratitude with you too, as you go. For people to share the mindful journey with. Grateful for loving family, friends, and our green earth's abundance. Let us just breathe that in. Let us just allow it to wash over our hearts. Let the gratitudes of our hearts and spirits ring out. Let the gratitude of the present moment call us back to where and when we are. Let the gratitude of this community be a balm for our weary souls in need of rest and healing and an end to suffering. May we be grateful. May we be grateful for all that is our lives today. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. Dear ones, as we enter into some shared silence this morning, we focus our hearts and minds on gratitude in this very moment. What are you grateful for right now? Let us share in this spiritual practice of mindfulness, of gratitude with one another, as we enjoy silence in our separate spaces collectively. As we come back from our shared silence, our hymn of contemplation this morning is hymn number 89, Come My Way, My Truth, My Life.
Today's reading is from the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. It begins with a beautiful quote from Rumi. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. I have a young friend who speaks of the time when he reads stories with his daughter as a time that needs no confirmation. There is wisdom in his phrase, a time that needs no confirmation. We all need to touch down with the source of life again and again in order to brighten enough to continue. Whether we make our way in by playing or listening to music, by meditating, by painting, or loving or reading stories to our children or to our friends' children or to ourselves, when we close our minds like tired eyes and surrender our hearts like mouths thirsted open, we come upon a common source where nothing need be approved or accepted, where no rejection or criticism need be overcome. The experience itself is all the authority we need. Interestingly, these renewing moments open precisely when we forget about ourselves. Like horses with blinders we can't quite shake, we sniff out our way until we come upon these deep pools to drink from. And for the moment, we are saved. In truth, we drink from this great paradox daily. Though everyone alive shares this moment we are living in right now, no one experiences this moment more directly than you. No one can say what it feels like for you to be alive but you. No one needs permission to be alive, to stay alive, to know the joy of touching your unrepeatable hand to the earth. This ends the reading.
In the late mornings recently, I have been packing up a little tote bag with a blanket and a book, a journal and a pen, and I have been walking down to the edge of the river near where I live. I lay out the blanket and lay down on it and just allow the sun to warm my body for a bit. As the warmth washes over me, something inside of me comes loose, opens up. It feels kind of like a knot coming undone. I place my hands and my bare feet in the grass and just do nothing for a while. This is where I go, to be with the divine, to be with spirit. After a time, I sit up and I look out onto the river, and right now in this season, the blooming, newly budding trees, and I write a letter to the source of my creation. It is truthfully time that needs no confirmation. It is a time to be in touch with the deeper cycles and rhythms of the earth. It is necessary for me and for all of us to find this time, even if and especially when we do not think we have the time to do so. I come to you all this morning speaking from our third principle of Unitarian Universalism. Our third principle out of 7, and hopefully one day 8 principles, states that we covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Each one of us here is capable of spiritual growth, and in fact, I believe built for spiritual growth. And we know it happens in community as well as individually. To engage in a spiritual practice is a path towards spiritual growth, towards living life with hearts and awareness wide open. Spiritual practices are essential to living a full life. Whether you meditate or ride a bike, whether you knit or cook or pray or even go for nature walks, each of us is in need of space for renewing moments for knowing the joy of touching our unrepeatable hand to the earth. It is a joy that can fill us up, the joy of losing ourselves. And it is a sustaining joy, as long as we take on something we practice at, something we return to consistently. Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom, a minister in our denomination, names in his curriculum, Spirit in Practice, 8 different categorizations of spiritual practice. He writes about personal spiritual practices, communal worship practices, spiritual partnerships, one person with another, mind practices, body practices, soul practices, life practices, and justice practices. Each one an exploration in and of themselves. And I list these out because while going through his curriculum, I became aware of spiritual practices I regularly engage in that I had not really previously known to be a spiritual practice. I wonder if this morning there is a new awareness for you around something going on in your life that is a spiritual practice that you may not have named as such before. And they certainly are practices, right? We practice these aspects of our lives because wanting to achieve the perfect moment of meditation or the perfect words to the prayer actually doesn't lead to spiritual growth. It leads to maybe feeling more in control of what you are doing. But spiritual growth is all about embracing what we do imperfectly. It has been said in a few places, perfectionism is the thief of joy. As our worship associate, Kitty Forbush, would say this morning, perfectionism sucks. It has also been called the enemy of the good. To be real, perfectionism is also one of the key characteristics of white supremacy culture. The ideology that many of us who swim in the fact that in the thought that white people and our aspects of culture are superior to the cultures of Black and Indigenous people of color. When looking up how this characteristic lives in white supremacy culture, I think we can see ways perfectionism is counter to spiritual growth as well, or spiritual growth too. Kenneth Jones and Tima Okun name perfectionism as little appreciation for the work someone is doing, feelings of inadequacy, making a mistake is seen as being a mistake, wrong as being wrong, little time or energy placed in being in reflection or identifying lessons learned. The tyranny of perfectionism about a spiritual practice can be the thief of its deepest joy. The tyranny of perfectionism in our lives can rob us of so much. Through all of these different aspects of perfectionism, we lose perspective about appreciating the work we are doing as a practice. No one is going to do it perfectly. In seminary, where I went, Star King School for the Ministry, the professors there, who had many more years' experience with religious leadership and scholarly study, told us on the first thing they really uttered to us was that we must find a spiritual practice to sustain our ministries. Sounds like a good idea, right? In order to companion and care for others, in order to bear witness to life in all of its joys and sorrows, celebrations and pain, it is probably a good idea to find a practice in life that sustains you. So I set out to find the perfect spiritual practice, one where I would be fed, which had deep roots in our tradition, which checked off all the boxes, and of course, which I would engage in perfectly at the same time every single day. It was exhausting. And what was more exhausting was keeping up that sort of expectation and heaping those onto my spiritual practice as well as just onto me. In desire of the perfect spiritual practice, I choked the life out of what was intended to give me life. And thankfully, I can reflect on that now and learn and grow from it. Thankfully, I am learning what a good enough spiritual practice is and where good enough can be helpful in other areas of my life. I hope that our church is a place where you get to learn what a good enough spiritual practice looks like and where you can be good enough in any area of your life. I still think it is good advice for all of us, not just for me, but for all of us, to be engaged in a spiritual practice each and every day, not held tightly with white knuckles, but handled lightly, loosely, freely, allowed to grow and evolve over time. The second obstacle to engaging in religious practice is making time, urgency, the feeling that there are always more important things to do or to get to. I don't know if anyone here struggles with this. I know certainly I do and have. I remember at the beginning of this pandemic, there were all of these think pieces about slowing down and having this pandemic be a spacious and not too full time. And for some people, I think this has been true. But more regularly, I hear about days full of back-to-back-to-back Zoom meetings. I hear about days full with little time for reflection or processing because it is on to the next thing and on to the next thing and on to the next more urgent thing. Kenneth Jones and Tima Okun also describe it like this. Through urgency, we are not able to engage in thoughtful decision-making. We have this inability to think long-term, inability to consider consequences, and always sacrificing a relationship with the sacred in order to achieve quick or highly visible results. We end up thinking about profit over relationship in a sense of urgency. What am I going to get rather than who am I with? I'm paraphrasing a bit here, as so much of what they have written is about how white supremacy culture shows up in the workplace and in organizations, but I also see this connection to ways urgency can be an obstacle to the continued and sustaining ways joy in our lives, to the continued and sustaining joy we experience through regular spiritual practice. If your prayer and meditation life, if our contact with the natural world and our being in community is meant to be a spiritual practice, its roots must be firmly placed in the fertile soil of joy. If we are doing something because we think we should do it, rather than knowing that we desire to do it, or even wanting to do it, our spiritual practices are going to be a slog. Begin with what brings you joy. Begin with what puts you in touch with your source, however you choose to define that. We as Unitarian Universalists are very broad about what our source is. If you don't know how to get there, try a bunch of methods and varieties and see what you actually like, or even just bring awareness and attention to the things already present in your life that help you to connect. Some would call this a version of mindfulness, bringing awareness and attention and intention to the ordinary practices of our daily lives. From an early age, I have been someone who likes to create, to make things. Now, I know I'm not alone in this congregation of artists and quilters and builders and tinkerers. I see some of you right now here knitting, crocheting, making right now as we are here together. And that's awesome. Please keep doing that. Please keep doing that even when we can be in person. Please keep doing that. Where it began, where this love of making and creating began was in the kitchen. When my mother would pull down my grandmother's old cookbook, The Joy of Cooking, and we would bake together. As a child, I was given simple tasks, which I would often make a huge mess with, like, stirring and mixing things or scooping out the cookie dough to get onto the baking sheet. As I got older, I began to strike out on my own, finding recipes I liked or following ones from my mom's recipe card box that she kept in our living room. At first, I was horrible at baking and cooking on my own. While trying to melt chocolate chips in the microwave, I burned them. When boiling water, I set a pot holder on fire. But over the course of time, I began to love cooking. I began to love having my hands on raw ingredients and transforming them into something completely different. Taking raw vegetables, the literal fruits of the earth, and chopping them in preparation for a meal, washing them, handling them, puts me in touch with a life force in a way unlike anything else. Time in the kitchen became time that needed no confirmation. It became sacred space for innovation and experimentation. Cooking especially lends itself to lots of experiments and trying different seasonings and ingredients. Sometimes things work out and sometimes they do not. And often that leads to very interesting conversations over dinner. But it is a practice where I find I am usually not looking at the clock and thinking about what comes next in my schedule. And it often leads to the joy of eating. Another spiritual practice, all on its own, especially when engaged with mindful eating, which invites us to slow down and savor each bite, the texture, the feel, and the flavor of our food. I wonder what practices you have in your day that put you in touch with the fact that you are the only person carrying your experience in that very moment. I wonder what you do to get connected to a sustaining source. I wonder where you are able to repeatedly connect the larger cycles of life. And I especially wonder which practices in life have sustained you this past year. What have you been doing to get through? Are they practices that you had before this pandemic that you've carried through? Have you found something new to engage in this time period that you never expected? Have you found ways to hang on to joy in the midst of all that may seek to separate and disconnect you from your source and from your joy? Spiritual practices, of course, are about practicing, so that one day the ways we connect with the divine, with the earth, and with one another may not feel right. It feels a bit off or less restorative. But then we recognize that all of the other days that we have regularly engaged in this practice, we felt connected. We felt the joy. We felt the sustaining force flowing through our bodies and our hearts. It is a time to be in touch with our growth, to feel grateful even for the days when we felt good following the practices we engaged in, even if it wasn't today. Perhaps to even put the day when things did not go well into perspective, recognizing that one day does not ruin our practice or mean we should give up and cannot be the thief of our joy. I find that practice space can be the space where we can create resilience in our own days. It can be the place where we let go of expectations and we can just be with what is. If everything is ruined when one thing goes poorly, we are in for difficult days ahead. If we find the fortitude, and if we find the joy, the deep joy at the source of these practices, I believe we are making that our foundation, that joy our foundation for living. Dear ones, as you go forth into this week, may you know the joy of engaging in a regular spiritual practice. May you find the things you love in this world and watch the ways that those practices connect you to the sacred. May you loose the fetters of perfectionism and urgency, shed them off in favor of your spiritual growth as an individual and our collective spiritual growth as a community. And may you know joy down in your heart for engaging in practices that sustain you and need no confirmation. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. In the spirit this morning of practicing together, in the spirit of trying things new, our closing hymn this morning is 1024, When the Spirit Says Do. We invite you to remain muted and to sing out joyfully from home, again creating a collective song from wherever we find ourselves.
You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 You got to cook when the Spirit says cook. You got to cook when the Spirit says cook. When the Spirit says cook, you got to cook, oh Lord. You got to cook when the Spirit says cook. Spirit says do. 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 You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you got to sing, oh Lord. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. Spirit says do. 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 You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Spirit says do.
Dear ones, as we extinguish our flame both here at First Universalist Church and in your own homes, I invite you to join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words in unison. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in, until we are together again. And I'll invite you now, as you feel called and comfortable, to turn your view to gallery view, to get to look out on the faces of those who are here with us in worship this morning, recognizing we are not seated next to one another, but we are certainly Zoom screening next to one another. To honor the connections in this space, we'll reach out and reach our hands out to the edge of our screens, creating a circle, an unbroken line, an unending line in this community, acknowledging that we are connected and not alone. Dear ones, as you go forth this week, may you know the practices that sustain you. May you find ways to sustain them. May you draw from the deep wells of joy that are there to help you stay resilient and to keep going. Friends, I wish you deep connections with the sacred this week, however you choose to define the sacred. And I just wish you deep joy in the practices of your days. May you know that you are loved. And may you go forth and be that love wherever you go this week. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. And as we enjoy our fabulous postlude from Anne Rhodey, I will invite you actually today to do a little bit of improvisation. As we close our service and join in our group benediction, I'll just invite you to write, "I embrace the joy of," and then whatever comes to mind as a spiritual practice for you. We want to see and be inspired by all the different spiritual practices of this community. So I embrace the joy of whatever a spiritual practice is for you. And let us type these words as we enjoy our postlude Happiness by Clark Gessner, done by Anne Rhodey.
Happiness is finding a pencil, pizza with sausage, telling the time. Happiness is learning to whistle, tying your shoe for the very first time. Happiness is playing the drums in your own school band, and happiness is walking hand in hand. Happiness is 2 kinds of ice cream, knowing a secret, climbing a tree. Happiness is 5 different crayons, catching a firefly, setting him free. Happiness is being alone every now and then, and happiness is coming home again. Happiness is morning and evening, daytime and nighttime too. For happiness is anyone and anything at all that's loved by you. Happiness